Hello, this is Scott, and I just want to do the second part of a three-part series. This is, again, the most important chapter of the semester. It's kind of like the alphabet. It's not real interesting when you just learn the part, but once you could put letters together and make words, and put words together and make sentences, and sentences together to make ideas, start to see the value. So I apologize if this is just sort of block and tackling, but it's really critical that you understand this concept very well. I can't overstress the importance of this. If you need any help, please let me know. I'm available. We have tutors. We have tutor.com. We have other websites, we have the book, we have other videos, lots of resources. Make sure you understand this chapter. So this video is going to be talking about the seller perspective. This video assumes that you already watched the video on the buyer side. So the buyer side, we started talking about the difference between demand and quantity demand. And in this video, we're going to be talking about the difference between quantity supplied and supply. Again, they sound really similar, but they're different. So we want to make sure we understand what that is and what the incentives are so we can put them together and get to equilibrium. We're going to start off by talking about quantity supplied, much like we started talking about quantity demanded. Quantity supplied is your willingness and ability to produce a given amount of a good and service at a particular price at a particular point in time. So it's the exact same definition as quantity demanded, except for one word. Instead of talking about your ability to buy, we're going to be talking about your ability to produce. And again, just like quantity demanded, quantity supplied is going to be represented by a point. And this time, again, just like quantity demanded, which was notated with a Q, but it had a QD for quantity demand, this is notated with a Q, but it has a QS for quantity supplied. So let's say I want to hire you, and I say, you know what, I'm willing to hire people at $10 an hour. You say, okay, well, at $10 an hour, I'm willing and able to supply 5 hours of work for you. That combination of at $10 at 5 hours is a quantity supplied. It's how much you're willing and able to supply at a given point in time at a given price. And it's just a point. So let's say I thought I need 10 hours of help. And right now I only have someone willing and able to work for me for 5 hours. Well, what am I going to need to do? Just like we had the law of demand, we have the law of supply. The law of supply says, I'm going to start with this middle one, as the price of a good or service goes up, you're more willing to sell that good or service. So before I offered $10 and you were willing to work 5 hours for me, but I need more labor. So how can I get more labor? Well, I have to increase your incentive to want to sell your labor to me. So I have to offer you more money. If the price of what I'm offering you rises, you have a greater incentive to sell. Ceteris paribus. That ceteris paribus, again, means all else equal. It means that you aren't getting better offers from other people as well. It means that other things haven't changed. You haven't suddenly won the lottery and you don't now need any money. So all else equal, if we just change one thing at a time, if I offer you more money, you're more likely to sell. If I offer you less money, you're less willing to sell. You have less incentive. That's the law of supply. These two things, because the arrows are both going in the same direction, they are called directly related, and that's the law of supply. So let's get back to quantity supplied. So at first we had, at a price of $10, you're willing to supply 5. Well, what if I increased my wage to say $15? At $15, we believe you'd be willing and able to sell more than 5 hours. So let's say you're willing and able to produce 7. Let's say I didn't have $10 to give you. I could only give you 9. Well, you're probably less willing to supply your labor. Maybe you're only willing to sell 3. The key here is as we move from one line on this chart to the next line on the chart, you move from one point to the other. As we move from one point to the other, we're going to call that a change in quantity supplied, not a change in supply. Now, just like we had quantity demanded and demand, we had quantity supply and supply. Supply is the collection of all the different quantity demandeds. So if we could connect the dots and make these all go together, then what are we going to have? We're going to have the supply curve. The supply curve is your willingness and ability to sell goods or service at any given price. And we're going to notate that as an S. We had each line was a quantity supplied and each line represented a point. But when we put them all together, that represents the supply curve. It allows us to estimate for other points that we don't have. For example, let's say I have $12 to offer for labor. How many workers, or how many hours do I expect to get? Well, from the chart, I know it's somewhere between 5 and 7. But from the graph, we're able to estimate it a little more closely. Just like we had the market demand, we're going to have the market supply. So I don't need to just hire you, I could hire a bunch of people. Just like we added up the market demand, we can add up the market supply. The market supply is the horizontal summation of all the individuals. So take, for example, $8. At $8, I'm willing to work 1 hour, Angela's willing to work 3 hours, and Julia's willing to work 5 hours. So if we add these up, 1 plus 3 plus 5, the total amount of labor I can hire at $8 an hour would be 9 units of labor. This line on the right is also shown in the graph. 1 plus 3 plus 5 sum up to 9. So what's interesting here is as supply gets bigger, it also moves to the right. That is a common, and actually the most common mistake on supply, is an increase in supply is a shift to the right. Often people view an increase as being up or down. And I'm going to try and avoid using the terms up or down and use increase or decrease. And an increase on both supply and demand is a shift to the right, and a decrease on both supply and demand is a shift to the left. So when we say that there's a change in supply, we are talking about the entire line shifting. It's got to be something caused other than the change in the price of the market good. Because we know when we change the price of the market good, we have a change in quantity supplied. So it's got to be for something else. So we already covered one of them. It could be that there are more sellers. As more sellers enter the market, the supply curve is going to shift to the right. Again, I want to emphasize, it's not a typo. I'm not making a mistake. This line on the right is an increase. The line on the left is a decrease. And we're going to use the notation supply increase or supply decrease. So what are the factors that can change supply? I like to tell a story here. Think about it this way. Let's pretend I told my daughter, who wants to have a lemonade stand, that I'm going to give her $5 to go buy everything she needs at Cub Foods. And she has to buy lemons and sugar and cups, and we have water here. If she goes to the store and lemons used to be 50 cents each, and now the price of lemons decreased. They went from 50 cents each to 25 cents each. Well, she could buy more lemons. Her ability to produce got easier when the price of inputs went down. So as the price of inputs go down, her abilities to supply increased. Notice I'm changing the price of the input. I'm not changing the price of lemonade. If I change the price of lemonade, if instead of her being able to sell lemonade for $1 a cup, she was able to get $10 a cup, that would increase her quantity supplied of lemonade. But here I'm changing the price of an input. So as inputs get cheaper, it gets easier to produce. As inputs get more expensive, it gets harder to produce. The next thing that can change is technology. Think of that little lemon squeezer. So my daughter is young. The amount of juice she can get out of a lemon with her hands is pretty small. But if I went out and I bought her a lemon squeezer, you put the lemon in and it's a vise and you squeeze it and you can get more juice out of it. As technology improves, supply improves. Now, I'm kind of proud of this. Your book used to only have that supply and technology could increase. And I had to write the author and say, you're missing that technology can go down and supply can go down. And the argument that the book used was that, well, once you have a better technology, you're never going to go back. To which I had to reply to the author, you're missing out on something. And I want you to pause for a second and think about what it is. How can technology go down? Did you get it? Did you pause it? That lemon squeezer can break. Or if we're talking about an assembly line, a machine can break. Or the power can go out. When technology declines, your ability to produce goes down. Supply can either increase as technology gets easier to produce, or decrease as technology makes it harder to produce. Then we could talk about taxes. Subsidies are just reverse taxes. So let's say I gave my daughter $5, and the government says, you know what, every time you produce a cup of lemonade, we're going to charge you 25 cents. Well, now it got harder for her to produce. She won't be able to produce as many goods because of the taxes. A subsidy is the exact opposite. A subsidy is exactly like Inver Hills. The government and others view it as a positive thing that they want to encourage. The government says every time that you make a cup of lemonade or every time you teach a student, we're going to help subsidize that cost. We're going to pay you 25 cents or we're going to pay Inver Hills a certain amount of money to help offset those costs. So if taxes go up, supply goes down. If subsidies go up, supply increases. The next one is the number of sellers, which we already covered. If more sellers enter the market, supply will increase. If sellers leave the market, supply will decrease. And finally, we have the same one in demand, but the incentives are the exact opposite. We're going to talk about the expectation of future prices. If we expect the price of lemonade to go up tomorrow, if tomorrow's going to be a scorcher, if tomorrow's going to be really hot, do you want to sell your lemonade today? Do you want to sell it tomorrow? I can get $1 a cup today, but I can get $2 a cup tomorrow. So if I expect the prices to go up, I don't want to sell now. I want to sell when the prices are high. So notice what we have going on here. The E of P, the expectation of prices, if you expect the prices to go up, we're going to say your supply, your willingness to supply these products now declines. Again, we haven't actually changed the price. We're just saying we expect the prices to change. So let's do a summary. Where do we see a change in quantity supplied? And where do we see a change in supply? Just like demand, the only way we can get a movement along the curve, the only way we can get a change in quantity supplied is if we change the price of the market good now. Other things that sound similar, changing the price, but of an input. So on the left side, if we change the price of the market good, we're changing the price of lemonade. That's movement along the demand curve. If we change the price of lemons, that changes our ability to produce. If we change the future price, if we change what we expect the price to be, that changes the supply curve. So on the right side, we change the price of inputs, the technology changes, the number of sellers change, we change our expected price, or taxes change, all will shift the demand curve. Make sure you know the difference between quantity supply change and supply change. Again, the notation on the left is QS, and we say it's movement along the curve. The word shift is completely reserved for a change in supply or a change in demand. Movement along the curve is the terminology we use, change in quantity demand and a change in quantity supplied.